All right, so first I'd just like to welcome everyone to our third program in the library's new Community Conversations program series. We did one on race relations in the US, and then we also just recently had one on voting. So this one is, of course, covering the topic of fake news, information and the spread of misinformation in the United States. So I'm so happy you guys could join us today. The goal of this session is to create an atmosphere of respect and comfort while asking the participants to challenge the way they think about the world that we live in. And it's our hope that the audience, so you guys will engage directly with our panel, that we have our awesome panel to address the topic of fake news. So any questions that you have, fair game. Questions can be accepted by you just directly asking the panel via your video conferencing or by connecting to us via the chat on the right-hand side. So before we begin the program, I just want to address a few virtual housekeeping matters that will allow us to move smoothly tonight. When you're not speaking, please mute your mic so the background noise does not interfere with the program. If you experience technical difficulties, Heather Phillips is our Zoom moderator. She's waving right there. You can either privately chat her just to kind of get her to help you troubleshoot those, or you can even just, if conversation's lulling, just say, just do a little wave and we'll try to reach out to you, okay? All right, so thank you all for joining us tonight.
Okay, I'd like to take a moment to not only thank all of you for attending, but to thank our panelists. And if you guys don't mind, ladies, don't mind introducing yourselves, that would be terrific. Linda, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Linda Hatfield. I am a librarian, reference instruction librarian at Muskingum University. I also have a few other jobs here. I teach a first-year seminar class, and I also work with as an advisor with, I'm an academic coach for students who are struggling academically. But my main job is reference instruction librarian at Muskingum.
Awesome, thank you. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Freese. I am the Assistant Director of the Muskingum County Library System. I have been a librarian for, 7 years now, and I love it, and I'm happy to be here to talk more.
Yay, thank you. Janelle?
Hi, I'm Janelle Hubble. I'm the Library Services Manager for OUZ and Zane State. And like Linda, I have responsibilities outside of the library. I too teach a first-year student seminar, and I teach a college reading skills class for students who are not college ready for reading. And I'm really happy to be here. This is a really fun event, I think.
Thank you. We're really glad you're here. So, all right, and then we have Sherry.
Sherry Russo. I'm driving. Just had a last-minute thing that came up with one of my kids, so I'm sorry. I'm making the best of it. I am the community engagement manager at WOUB Public Media. And I have also, before I got into community engagement and kind of the public relations and marketing side of things, I was a reporter for several years in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, Mansfield, Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio, and then I worked in the WOUB newsroom for 8 years. So, so this is a topic that's very close to my heart.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so now that we've met our panel, I'd just like to open up the floor for discussion. Would our participants like to ask a question for anyone on the panel or the whole panel at large? It's okay if you don't have it. We've got some questions. So if you think of something, feel free to interject. All right, so I guess I'll pose the first question. I'm going to pull right from the general question, so feel free, anyone who has a response, to jump right in. So what role does social media play in the spread of misinformation?
I can jump in if you want me to. So I think social media is by design supposed to be something that shows you the world that you want to see, right? You pick your friends, you pick what news agencies you're following. You select just by clicking a thumbs up on something, you're telling the algorithm that those are the kinds of things that you like and that you want to see. So what I think that social media does to contribute to the spread of misinformation is it kind of puts you in a bubble where you're not seeing the other side of issues. You're not seeing the opposing viewpoint. And especially in the media landscape that we have right now with, with the 24-hour cable news, both sides have a news outlet or two that leans their direction. And so if you lean right or you lean left, you can select that information to fill your news feed. And then some fake news, I guess, not coming from real news outlets, but generated by those sides that are strictly opinion pieces, are then presented to you as a news story. And so your perception of the world is not whole, in my opinion, on social media. That's what I would say about how social media influences the spread of misinformation.
I would agree with you, Sherry, and I think that when you do have just one side that you're always seeing, you feel more comfortable to speak out your opinions and share the things that you like to share. I teach a Library 220, which is a Beyond Google Research Methods class, and we have a whole section where we've been talking about this within the last week and a half, actually. And we've been talking about, if you see a meme that you like that speaks to the things that you believe, what do you do with it? And even though we've been talking about evaluating our sources all semester long, almost everyone in the class said, well, I'd share it. Like, well, how do you know that it's true? So it is just the natural inclination of social media. It is what you feel comfortable with, and the more you feel comfortable, the more you share and speak out. And it's not always the right things that you're sharing and speaking out about.
So I think, that leads us to, I know when I'm personally using Facebook, coming from the librarian background, I see people share things and I'm just like, oh no, oh no. How do we considerately, do you have any suggestions for how people can considerately address that misinformation piece and say, I think that this is not accurate information, or this isn't a valid source? What suggestions do you have for people to address those issues with, say, family and friends?
Well, personally, with family and friends, it's so difficult because you don't want to damage a relationship by saying, what are you doing? This is not something that you should be sharing. This is not a good information source. So what I have tried to do is I either go to Snopes and search it and then post the link about whether it's true or false in the comments, just saying, you may want to double check this. Snopes says it's not true, in a very, very friendly way. Like, I'm not confrontational at all about that. Or I try to find a news source that has both sides of that issue represented in the article. So, I work for PBS and NPR, so I got to toot our horn. We try real hard to bring both sides of the issue. And so that's the first place I look. I'll go to NPR or I'll go to PBS NewsHour and try to find a story that has the side that they're representing with whatever they've posted and the other side. And I'll say, well, and then nicely again in the comments, I'll say that there's another side to this, you should check it out, and just kind of that way. I feel like that way I'm not ending relationships, but I'm doing my part to try to make sure that misinformation propagated over the internet.
I think I would add to that too. With social media, I kind of liken it to people to being on the road is often when you see people post, you forget that there's a person behind it, even if it's your family member or friend, because you're not talking to them face to face or hearing their voice. So it's sort of like when you have road rage and then you realize that the person behind you is somebody's mother or sister or family member. So I recently read something about calling out versus calling in. So when somebody posts something that might be misinformation or disinformation, instead of me just saying, that was really stupid on the comments, then I might actually private message them. So I can give that as a learning experience, or what I might do is instead give them a call and just talk to them about that. The problem is it's a lot of time invested, and you really hope that what you're going to say gets across to them. But you know, I've seen some of the most minor things posted online that's inaccurate. Like I had a friend's mother who is a retired teacher, and she posted a picture of like a tick nest, and she's like, you've got to watch these in the wild, and I'm like, that picture looks weird. So I search it, I find the accurate information, and I told her daughter, who then told her, and it saved her a lot of embarrassment publicly for me just to sort of shame her in that way. So it's kind of a hard thing to find that balance, but I try to come at it as compassionately as possible, because I just try to remember that they're people, and unless they're being really negative or hateful, then they just don't realize. So starting those conversations is a great way to begin.
So I have to admit that I'm not on social media that much. I don't have an active Facebook account. And part of the reason that I don't have that is because it's too much for me. Like it's just too much information, and it's too much arguing, I think, and it's very stressful. So when I'm dealing with misinformation in a face-to-face situation, I think it's easier to, if you very delicately ask, like, oh, what's your source? I've never read anything that indicates that. I'd really like to look into that information. And once you ask where they're getting their information from, they maybe think about it a little bit. Not always, but sometimes. And I also think working with students, we have to be really careful. You don't want to tell them, oh, you're wrong, or something along those lines, because they'll shut down and they won't listen to you anymore. So it's easier to kind of slowly try to turn their head and get them to look at other resources and think about other things, think about other perspectives, I should say. And so maybe it's not a matter of getting them to change their minds about information over the course of one class period, but maybe over the course of the semester is more appropriate to hope for.
I agree with all of you. And recently, I am on Facebook, and although I'm not on it very much anymore because of just what Janelle said, it is too much. It just overwhelms me. But recently, you know, a friend from high school posted something that was very political, and it didn't sit well with me. What was being said didn't sit well with me. So I looked it up, as all of you have said you have done as well. And it wasn't true either. It was information on purpose. And so I politely in the comments made, you know, here, and just as Sherry said, you know, here's the place where I found that this was wrong, and actually I found it was in 2 places that it was wrong. And the person, my friend, was very nice and very polite and thanked me, but boy, oh boy, there were people that I didn't know that just started attacking, like, who do you think you are? And so I have backed way off. I think last year I may have done more of that, just because, you know, I'm a librarian. I want to make sure that people are sharing right things, but it is not worth it to me to get into a big argument. I think I go Janelle's route instead, and just in the classroom, I just hammer in that evaluate your sources, and hopefully that it will work as we go forward. The next generation will be looking at their sources instead of just posting things that they agree with.
question. Hi, thank you very much for sharing all that you have shared so far. I agree with Facebook can get way too much. I joined years ago just to connect with people that I don't see very often, and never expected how it would evolve into what has evolved into. So yes, it's very problematic. And I have relied on Snopes in the past. And so I was just wondering, because it's already been mentioned, that it has been referenced already once tonight. That was one of my questions. I mean, what do you all feel about Snopes? Can we really, count on it as being, a really valid resource? That's my question for right now.
I have used Snopes a lot in the past, but one of the things to make sure that things are correct, look at least 2 or 3 other sources to see if they agree. So I go to other places. I use factcheck.org. I have also used PolitiFact. These, especially if it's politically related, I use those kinds of things because their goal is to make sure that misinformation and disinformation are stopped, so people can actually get good information, so they have the information to make their decisions. So I try to back those up. I also look at other news sources and that kind of thing. So I would agree that finding other sources to back up Snopes then gives you an idea that Snopes could be right in what they're saying as well.
Yeah, and I would say the only problem that I've experienced with Snopes is that sometimes you go there as when something has first started to circulate and it hasn't been reported to them yet, so they don't have any information on it, and I feel lost and not know what to do. And I think the only advice I would offer in those moments is before the fact-checking organizations can have a chance to get on something, and this is really difficult. I mean, I find it difficult for me sometimes too, is you see something and you want to share it, you want to do something with it, or you want to stop other people from doing something with it. And I would just say, just pause and report it. Facebook has some really good, report this as questionable or report this as misinformation, and do your part to get those organizations looking at it so that it can get stopped quickly. But as we've seen, misinformation can spread like wildfire, and so it's that's what I think is the biggest problem, is just that it doesn't move as quickly as the social media pages do.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that too.
I was gonna say we all like unmuted at the same time. No,
Well, I was just going to say, go ahead, Erin. You go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's exactly true, because I go on NPR and OUB, but it's not something that is shareable. It's not, I mean, I do, but it's not something that pops up on somebody's Facebook where they're like, haha, prove my point and share. And then all of a sudden, all this misinformation goes out. Yeah,
Right.
just like,
Yeah.
like you said, like wildfire. I mean,
Right.
the truth apparently is not that interesting. I don't.
Right. Well, and I think, one of the things that I notice on social media is a lot of misinformation starts with one fact or one thing that someone heard. And where I think social media has really kind of ruined the spread of valid information is that journalists, the role of the news media was supposed to be to fact check that information before it got out. When I was a reporter, I got told crazy stuff about politicians and about people doing things they shouldn't be doing all the time. But journalism school, they taught me I had to have 3 sources for that before I could put it on the air. And so I would take that and then I would try to find it in 3 different places from 3 reliable sources before I went live on the air and said, this is the truth. And so people will share things that are probably, some part of it might be true, but it didn't pass the sniff test for all the journalist organizations to publish it. And so now, and then they turn around and say that the news media is hiding information, which is not how journalism is supposed to work. So I think that we've taken out that fact-checking wall that we used to have, and so little bits and pieces of truth get circulated as fact, and then snowball out of control. And then personally, when I see people blaming the media for all for all of this, I get all up in arms, and I'm like, you're not letting the media do their job anymore. So the media is reacting now to whatever's on social media and trying to deal with that. And so it's a scary thing, I think, but I don't know what the solution is other than to continue to be vigilant and fact check and bring about the balanced stories that represent both sides, and just keep putting those out there for people to consume.
I think I would add, Sherry, as well, what I've seen with family, friends, especially on social media, they may share something that's true, but it's taken out of context so simply. So I'll see people who, I don't know how they do it, but they find a news article that's 3 years old and they post it as though it happened today. And so they reignite something that may not necessarily be accurate. So that can be a little bit dangerous. And I always just tell people, you need to go to the source, check the About Us page, check other sources. And also, if you're looking at articles, check the date and maybe even go a little crazy if the image doesn't look the same. I think we've all seen things about State of the Union addresses and what images were accurate here and what were there. See if you can search in Google for that same image, and if it's older or if it's a new same image, or a new fresh image. So it almost feels like you have to do research for every piece of information you see, but that is the age that we're in. It's a lot of work.
So kind of piggybacking on what Stephanie just said, I think that for those of us who are working with patrons and who are working with students, it's important to emphasize that being a consumer of information, you cannot be passive, you have to be active. This isn't something where you just take information in and accept it. You have to do a little bit of legwork and find out what's true or what you can believe, etc. And along the same lines of things being taken out of context, I think one of our questions I was looking at before our session tonight had to do with journalism students and what is one of the big problems you see them having as students, and what do you do about that problem? Taking things out of context. It's a little chunk of information that they're paraphrasing, or they're quoting something that's paraphrased instead of going back to the original source. People don't seem to want to do the legwork, or maybe it's that they don't know how to do the legwork.
I'm actually really interested in that, because as with the journalism students now coming in, do they want to, how they have like social media bloggers or influencers or whatever, is that what they're thinking, or are they actually thinking NPR journalism or somewhere in between?
Well, I don't know what they're thinking now. Before I became a librarian and before I became an educator, I was in journalism school. Sherry was talking about the classes that she took. We had a whole class in journalistic ethics, and I brought that up to my class this past week, and I just took a poll on how many of you feel like you can trust some reporter out there, and they all felt that all the reporters were lying. Not all of the reporters are lying. I'm sure there probably are reporters out there and news organizations that are, but there is such a thing as journalistic ethics, and a lot of reporters take that very seriously. I'm sure Sherry did as well. But it is, and Janelle said too, you know, I don't know that that people want to do all the work. So yeah.
That was just when Janelle was talking, it made me curious. It's like, what do they even think is journalism anymore if you go into that as a major? Is it you just reposting stuff, or are you actually going to be, you know, a journalist and do the work?
I would have to say that some of the students that I work, or who I work with, who are intending to leave OU Zanesville and go to Scripps down in Athens, I would say that they, it's more of an idea, right? Or more of a concept of being a journalist. It's the title. They don't understand what it means. So
You want to come say hi?
they're disillusioned maybe once they find out.
Yeah, well, that's what I'd be a little nervous about, really. Where you think like you almost get paid more, it seems, from what I, you know, to do the nonsense than to do the actual reporting. Because I love NPR and I do my best, but at the same time, you know, like I know that they're not making what like TMZ is or Facebook.
So you have talked about being an active participant in receiving information. So what can the average person do? What tools should they have in their arsenal when they are looking at an information piece? What can you suggest to them that they use?
I'll start this one out because I just found a really good source that I have been using with my students. That it's a little quiz that really kind of amazed me. Spotthetroll.org. It's a web page quiz that lets you observe 8 different profiles, and then that asks you a bunch of questions and gives you some information, and you have to choose whether it is an authentic profile or whether it's a Russian troll. It was fascinating, and I got all of them right except one, and I think I probably should have gotten the second one wrong, but I guessed. But things that really make you think about what you see on social media and what you don't see as well. So that is a really good source that makes you think about the things that you are seeing on your social media pages. So I would suggest anyone just to go take the little quiz, spotthetroll.org. Oh, good. Heather posted that. Good job, Heather.
So this isn't necessarily a tool, more of just something to pay attention to. If you find yourself having a strong response to something that you're reading, a strong emotional response, I think that that's an indicator that you need to find out more information about whatever you're responding to so strongly. And I also think that if you don't have a response, or if your response is to just accept the information, you probably also need to find some backup information, because you're possibly falling into some confirmation bias where you're only looking at information that you already believe or already know. So you maybe want to do a little bit of background work on that.
I also have my students use, we call it the CRAP test, C-R-A-A-P. Yeah, it's a good word to think about, but you want to spot the crap that you see. So you want to think about currency and relevancy, but the most important things you want to think about are accuracy, authority, and purpose. So again, going back to that accuracy, can you back it up with other sources? Authority, who is writing that, and do they have the authority? Do they have the credentials? Do they have, or should you be listening and believing what they say? And then the other is purpose, and purpose is so important, especially on websites, because anybody can put anything on the on the internet. So look at the about, you know, so you know what the web page is doing, and who is behind it, and who's funding it, and all of those things. And think about, are they trying to educate? Are they trying to entertain? Or are they trying to change your mind or change your own bias. So those things, I've told my mother this a lot. You know, look at things before you post, and use that crap test as a guide before you post something. As I'm trying to teach my students, it's not just for a research paper, but these are lifelong skills that you can use.
You're on.
Hi, I have a comment. I was on Facebook yesterday and someone posted a picture, and it was not like from a news source. It did not have any type of organization attached with it at all, but it was a very disturbing picture, and then there was a caption that went with it. And so I've been evaluating my response to that, listening to everything you all are saying, and it definitely raised my emotions. I mean, I did not respond to it. It was so upsetting to me that I just had to get away. And I honestly, though, I did try to find it on Snopes. And I used all different search terms, you know, for what I was seeing, and Snopes was total zero. You know, everything I typed in, all the different searches, no results. So I didn't know what to do with it. So I have not responded, but I just cannot believe that it is an accurate depiction of anything at all. There is something wrong with that post, and so I know that I would have to handle it very carefully. But I don't like to stay silent. I do speak up more than I used to, and I feel like a very appropriate way. Hope so. And then I just try to stay away from that subject. But anyway, I don't know how any of you would have handled that, if you would have seen something, if you would have had that type of response. And then beyond Snopes, I've already heard now what you've made a few other suggestions. Maybe I just should have done a big Google search or something. Maybe that would have helped. I don't know. But I was feeling pretty bad about it. So I just share that. It happens.
I think it's really common still to see people sharing just personal stories or posts that aren't news stories as well, that may not be accurate. One I've seen, I think, many times over the past 5 years for me has been the 52 horses story. I don't know if anyone knows this story, but basically it actually happened in 2011. An owner died and they had to find homes for 52 horses, but it keeps being shared every year since then, and people think it's real, and there's even a phone number, and it's 9 years that this story has been shared. But how do you even begin to find that if it's not a news story? So you see that a lot come up, and I just try to be careful. I search it through. I mean, I just recently saw it come up to say that the owner died because of COVID, so we need to rehome these 52 horses. So, you know, follow your gut to try to search. Keep searching. It may not be on Snopes. I think I posted the staff here from Muskingum County Library. They worked really hard on creating a fake news fact-checking resource page on the library's website, where you can see lots of different resources and compare back and forth, where it may not be on Snopes, but it might be somewhere else as well.
And just to add to that, Stephanie, you can do reverse image searches. So I think you had mentioned that it was an image that first drew you to that information or misinformation item. You can take that image and go into, say, like TinEye. I just posted that link in the chat, and upload that image, and then it'll pop out all the instances where that image appears. So you can kind of do that where you look at different, you know, articles where that was posted, or where that image was originally posted, and use that as a base point for your research.
Good to know. Thank you.
And just as a random note, if you ever have any questions or concerns, you can always come to the library, Muskingum County, or I'm sure the colleges, and we'll certainly help you.
So I think it has to be said, we're in election season, so naturally there's a lot of conflicting information out there. One question that we had kind of considered for this discussion was, how do I fact check major political leaders? Who can I trust, especially when there seems to be this us versus them? What resource can I trust?
I think two things to remember here are, one, major political leaders are human and they may not always get it right. I like to liken it to, my boss, who's also on this, but they get so much information at all times that maybe they didn't get the right information there. And I try to just give them a little bit of grace with that. It's hard because we put our leaders on such a high pedestal that we forget that they might be misinformed. And it's also so much more responsibility for them, because if they share the wrong information, it's not one person, 5 people, it's millions and millions of people. But for that fear of who do I trust and who do I fact check, I think it all comes down to multiple sources. I purposefully check a source I don't agree with, like a news story that I don't agree with that news site regularly, because I want to see that perspective. Because as Sherry mentioned in the beginning, if you're in your echo chamber and you're in your bubble, then it's easier to not believe it. So I want to read something and I want them to help me change my mind. And most of the time they don't, but you read it with the open mind as much as you can and use as many sources as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I'm sorry, by the way, that I disappeared. I went into a really bad cell area. But anyway, I agree with that 100%. And I actually have had this conversation with many people on both sides of any political issue, is that if you're only watching the stations or reading the newspapers who represent your slant, then you're not getting the whole picture. And so if you're only listening, in this case, to that one political leader, then you're not getting all of the information. And so you have to force yourself to look at multiple sources. If you tend to watch Fox News, then you need to make yourself watch MSNBC that same day on that same issue to get both sides, and then you will have a good perspective, and you will have what your political leader said as fact, and you will have what the other side thinks of what they said, and then you have to take that information and evaluate it. But if you're only looking at things that you agree with, or turning to news sources that you find support your viewpoint, then you're going to be more susceptible to other misinformation as it comes out. And so you need to, as hard as and difficult as that might be to watch the other side, especially if you're truly passionate about whatever this issue is, it's just good to have that perspective so you can see that there might be a middle ground in this somewhere and find what the truth is. Because I believe the truth is somewhere in the middle.
And I also think relevant to looking for information related to politics, it's important to look at the history of votes. So you can look at your congressman and how they voted over the course of this past session, over the course of their history in Congress, and that's at congress.gov. And you can also do that with your state representatives, et cetera. I think it's important to go look at that information before you vote.
I would agree with that as well. Am I okay? No, not hearing me? Okay, all right. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that those sources are really great at being able to check up and see, before you go into vote, who is doing what. I also think that factcheck.org is a great place because they are a consumer advocate for voters. They are very, very middle of the road. They don't support one side or the other. They're funded by private donors. They only have two corporate donors, and that's Facebook and Google. And I got a little concerned about that as well. However, I looked into why, and Facebook and Google to make sure that part of their fight was to educate people and to fight the viral deceptions that are going on. So both of those corporations donated to factcheck.org only, and they're not allowed, the organization does not allow them to seek or change any of the information on their page. So I kind of rely on that too. And I will say that I agree with Sherry. I'm a very middle of the road kind of person, and I have a lot of friends on both sides of the political spectrum, and I have done the same thing where I will listen to some MSNBC and Fox and some of the others just to make sure I know what's going on both sides. And as Sherry said, there somewhere in the middle lies the truth. So if you're doing all of these things, then you kind of have a good idea what the truth really is.
So I have a question for Sherry. What happens if you find out something that you've reported is factually inaccurate? What happens then? What's the process?
Well, so if we definitely find out, like for sure, there's no doubt it's inaccurate and we have made a mistake, we issue a retraction. Now that's hard to do on television and radio because maybe people aren't watching at the same time or listening at the same time, and they heard the bad information a couple hours earlier and we issue our retraction. Say we put the bad information on at the 2 o'clock news break and at 4 o'clock we realized it was wrong. Then you don't know if you've gotten to that same group of people, which is what always made my heart hurt when there was a mistake. And reporters are human, just like politicians are human. As we said, there's going to be mistakes, and so I hope people will give reporters grace in that case. But in this kind of charged environment right now, it's it's seen with malicious intent. So we want to issue the retraction as soon as we know that it was false and get rid of any spread of that bad information. But like I said, that's difficult when you're broadcasting. However, the internet and our webpage makes that real easy. So we do put a retraction on the story. At the top of it, we mark it with update and say that we had this information wrong, this was misreported, here's the correct information. And then we also offer, we offer on our website places where listeners and readers can contact our newsroom to ask questions about why that happened. It's really important just to get that all out there because, like I said, in this charged environment that we're in, and not just about politics, but about the pandemic and about masks. And I mean, there's so many things that that people have gone on one side or the other of. And I feel like reporters are being accused of having malicious intent. So I think you just have to be as transparent as possible and spell out how the error happened, and of course get it out there as soon as you know. But that is our policy, is as soon as we realize that there's an error, we issue a retraction in every place that story was consumed, whether that was the radio, the TV, or the website.
Thank you.
Sure.
Does anybody else have any thoughts before we go on? Erin, you look like you were about to say something.
No, I was gonna actually ask the same thing. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Can I actually ask a question to other panelists?
Yeah.
I think, so this is for Janelle and Linda. As you know, when I was in school, before library school, I don't think that many, besides library school, I should say, I don't think many students in their adulthood now, when they were younger, received a lot of schooling and education on how to do fact checking, because there were only so many news sources back then and so much to do that before the internet, we didn't have to worry about this. So can you talk a little bit about what are the requirements for your schools for kids with information literacy and learning how to navigate the crazy world that we live in with news, 24-hour news cycles, with the internet, with social media, etc.?
Well, I know here at Muskingum, we do have Muskingum University, we do have this Beyond Google research methods class. It is not a requirement, but it is in the Gen Ed, and it does fit one of the categories of the Gen Ed. So we do have usually 2 to 3 sections a semester of this class. So we're hitting a lot of our students. And part of the thing that, besides, the whole class is based on how to write a research paper. But in the midst of that, we can train them, as I've been doing the last couple of weeks here, is talking about how the skills can then transfer into life outside of college. So once you learn how, I mean, I'm hoping that they remember this CRAP test. I mean, I know it's a silly word, but it can help them, make them think, oh, I need to run this through the CRAP test before I know whether it's good enough to share or not. So, but yes, there are ways that you can get students to realize, and then we also, a lot of the courses have us come into their classes to teach them how to research. I'm sure Janelle does that as well. And we do that kind of thing too. When you're hitting on plagiarism, those kinds of things, these are skills that we hope they take outside of the university.
So yes, I do go into classrooms like you do, Linda, and do usually assignment-based instruction sessions. What I'm about to say is a generalization, so I want to be clear about that. It's a generalization. We do have students who come to OU Zanesville who are really good students. They know how to do research, they know how to write, they're willing to read. But we also have a significant population of students who are underprepared for college. And maybe they're coming from schools that don't have media centers. We have a number of schools in our service area that don't have libraries in their schools, which is shocking, I think. And they get really overwhelmed when you introduce them to research tools. And you know, what's the difference between the catalog and a database? And well, the catalog is a database, and you know, those terms all seem so abstract to them that you can see they kind of shut down or their eyes glaze over. So that's the first problem I encounter, I think, or the first thing that I'm concerned about. The other is time. I'm not given that much time to interact with students, even in an instruction session. So sometimes I get 35 minutes. I'm lucky if I get 55 minutes. I do have a couple of instructors at Zane State who asked me to come back multiple times during the semester, which I think is wonderful. But I think we have to take it slow, because the more information you give them, the quicker they shut down. They get confused, and I don't blame them, right? Do you experience that, Linda? Do you see that they shut down?
Yes, very much. And we did a poll when we go into each first year seminar class, or usually they come to us, but COVID, so we're going to them. And we do this little poll, a Kahoot poll, and they ask the question, how many of you have written a big research paper? And the number was just astounding. There aren't many writing big research papers anymore. So they're not coming to college prepared to do that kind of thinking. And so then they are overwhelmed. And so asking them to evaluate something on top of pulling all the sources together, and it's just too much. That's why I like our course, because it breaks the research process and that you would normally take a couple of weeks, we take a whole semester to do. But I applaud things like this, where you're actually, the public library is making information like this available to the public, because this kind of stuff is important, especially now. Critical thinking about the things that they're seeing, and thinking about, instead of just hitting share when they like it. So I applaud the library for doing something like this.
So I just wanted to jump in real quick if I could. I have taught a journalism course at Ohio University Lancaster for a number of years. And what I always found, amazing was the number of students that would use Wikipedia as a source in a paper. And when I would question them on that or tell them they couldn't do that, the pushback that I would get was insane. I mean, they would be like, well, it's on the internet. And I'm like, but do you understand that this source is written by everyone and anybody could change it? And so this could be a source that you use to pursue other sources to verify it, but it cannot be your primary source of information. And so I think that is just, to me, that is just one small example of the problem. But people perceive anything that they see on the internet or in print as truth, and don't necessarily take the steps to think about where that information came from and if they have a responsibility to double check it.
It's easy. That's why they use it. It is easy. I went to a conference once and heard the founder of Wikipedia speak, and he is passionate about checking the pages as they are posted on Wikipedia. There's a whole people whose job it is to search out those posted on Wikipedia to check to see if they posted their references at the end, that kind of thing, and if it's not true, they pull it off. However, because it is a wiki, and the nature of a wiki is that anybody can add or take it. So you don't know whether you have seen it when it was just posted or whether after it's been changed. So Wikipedia is a good place to look at references, but not a good place to cite as your source.
If I could just backtrack for a minute here. I mentioned that students aren't prepared. And one of the ways that I try to offset that is to establish a connection right away, let them know who I am, make sure I'm involved in new student orientation. I teach a couple of classes, so I'm kind of always around, and I try to make myself the person that is helpful. Oh, go ask Janelle, she'll help you figure that out. So that's my really, it doesn't sound very professional maybe, but it works the best. If you make yourself approachable, they will come and talk to you.
So Stephanie, we've discussed from the college aspect of how we prepare students for evaluating information. What can you say about how we prepare our community from all ages as a public library?
Oh, that's a lot. We see so many people, we see babies to seniors. So where do you begin to prepare people? I think that we do it sort of in two different ways. It's both planned and organic. Programs like this, this is where we educate people. This is where we help people. When we do history programs or events, we make sure we bring in experts. We vet them before they come in. When we buy for our collection, you know, most people don't know, in order to be a librarian, and to order for our collection, you have to have a master's degree in library science. They are very trained, very specifically educated in very specific collections. So they really choose the best resources for our community, and therefore buying books and materials and DVDs that are most accurate and appropriate for our community. I just checked out a book the other day, just reading for preparing for this. It was, I think it was called like Fact or Fiction, a CAIA's Guide to Interpreting Information Literacy or something like that. I can give you the resource later, but those resources are available, and that's how we sort of plan it out to help people. Janelle also touched on something really important, and it's being approachable. I have heard from many people, and I've seen it, that if you're not approachable, then people don't want to come to you, no matter what their age is. People don't always trust their doctor, they don't trust their politicians, but they do trust their friends. So if we portray ourselves as friends, as trusted sources in the community, they're going to come and ask us first. And it's really wonderful when you do have people that come into the library to ask you before they go to Google. So what people don't know is we have this amazing reference staff that are hired and dedicated to answering questions. They are your Google, and 2 of them are on this staff right now, or on this call right now, and Caitlin takes care of our youth as well. And so we get those questions for people that don't have the internet and don't have the ability to fact check, where some questions might be simple as, you know, can you tell me more about the history of the Putnam district in Zanesville? And some are complicated. You know, I've been a reference librarian, and they'll ask, is socialism also communism? So when you get these questions, you have to be very careful to not give your opinion, but you also have to make sure you're giving fact and going to the resources that we're trained in, and also making sure those resources are available and easy for the public to use. So there's no one easy way to do it, but we try to get everybody a little bit at a time.
Thank you. And I'm just going to piggyback on that really quick too, because youth, we do of course have our collection, but we also start with information literacy training as early as story time by incorporating nonfiction texts in our story time and talking about true facts and the difference between fact and fiction. So just introducing those rudimentary concepts at an early age to build that foundation that later is, you know, grown by grade level all the way up through the point that, you know, they get to you in college and into adulthood.
I used to do story time, so I know how important it is. You know, I remember the first time they asked me to do baby story time. I'm thinking baby story time. But I was amazed at how much they really got out of it, and especially when you could watch them from the time their parents brought them in the carriers clear up to the time when they're toddlers in preschool story time and on to elementary. So all of that you do with the nonfiction, it's all literacy skills. And then the more you can incorporate the, you know, how to tell fact from fiction is important. So the library is an invaluable commodity in our community.
Well, and if I can, you know, in any age, you know, I am a reference librarian. That's what I knew I was meant to be. I got thrown into story time, and those kids could see right through me, you know, like, but they see Kate and her staff who, you know, they believe, they know that they're telling them the truth. It's amazing, you know, and that really is a good point, Kate, because I know that I even trying to read a story, kids are like, this girl is not invested, but you guys are, and it makes a difference. So that's just my 2 cents, because I think youth librarians are amazing, because I don't have the patience or I just couldn't do it. And I think it's because they know that I'd rather be reading a nonfiction book in the 900s than making cow noises.
Put me in a story time any day, any day. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. We all approach this topic with such passion, and I feel like it would be hard for someone to deny our passion about this and say, you know what, you're going to lead me astray. I think that, you know, we come at this from an unbiased, honest approach, and, you know, there's nothing more important than that. So when we have students come to us at the desk, you know, I want them to find the right information, and I will work with them through all of their questions. And when they're like, well, how do you know? Then we talk about that. And I talk about, you know, my research methods, my strategy, and in doing that and talking them through that, that coaches them to, you know, use those skills on their. Did anyone else have any thoughts to add? Any other questions?
Hi, I just wanted to
Yeah,
join
go ahead.
in. I mean, you're all this amazing group of, well, you're all women, and truly, Mike and I, my husband and I, we truly value journalists. We truly value the local newspaper, the Times Recorder. You know, we try to support that. We totally love NPR and PBS. Yes, we rely on those 2 resources, and just really appreciate knowing the quality of people that we have in the libraries in the community is so reassuring, especially working with younger people coming up through the ranks and choosing all these different types of careers, but they're getting the really basic important information about resources, and I feel very good about our community, and so I thank you all for doing such good work. Mike and I had the pleasure and the privilege and the great experience of being on the library's racism conversation, and so that, and now this, I just feel like I'm just learning so much more about what the library has as resources for our community, and I'm sure that people do not realize what you all do for the community. So we thank you very much.
Yes, I'd like to echo that as well. I mean, what a wonderful expert panel this is, and you're a true gift to us and a true gift to our community. So I really thank you all. It's very uplifting, and it makes you feel good about where we live.
So thank you all.
I think it's important to I try to remind myself on a regular basis, just to remember that when I am thinking about
This is an awesome experience. I don't know if any of our panelists have any final.
Zoom fun.
Might be my internet that is going wonky right now.
Might be. It's you or me, one of us.
I think it is. You go on.
I was just going to say, you know, even during this really, really hard time of a pandemic and an election year, no matter what side that we're on, I just try to remember that we're all trying to fight for the same thing in our own way. And that's just to make everything a better place. And it takes a lot of work, but it takes so much work, right? Like fact checking feels like a college class every time you get on Facebook now. So as Janelle mentioned, it's self-care. You can't go out and be a warrior and change every single person every single day. But if you find, the term fake news is not new. It is a very antiquated term. It's older and it's existed. And when you bring people from the opposite sides together, we all just do want the truth. So I appreciate what you both said. I think we do live in a really amazing community, and we have some awesome resources together, and I think we all want the same thing.
Can I shamelessly plug Heather?
Yeah.
Okay, because she has this great mental health series that started. Heather, was it this Monday or last Monday? It's like a mental health awareness series.
Started
And
last Monday. I did
and
it
it's
with Muskingum
awesome.
County Mental Health Services and Behavioral Board. I might not have gotten their acronym right, but that is the one. Every Monday they're on Facebook. And they've done a great job. They got therapists from all over the 5 southeastern counties, and they're doing amazing.
Yeah, I was watching the one last night actually, and I thought, oh, that's amazing. And it was Guernsey County, who we're partnering with other things too, so it's great. Shameless plug.
If you need a little self-care.
Absolutely, especially during this.
I love that you're doing that. Mental health is so important, especially now. I mean, goodness sakes, I see so many students who are really struggling and don't know the resources they have in front of them. So what a valuable resource you're providing for the community.
That's Heather. So. She saw a need and absolutely filled it. I think it's what, 12 weeks? Or no?
We're going through
12.
December.
Yay, young librarians.
Yay.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll end this conversation, but of course that isn't, sorry for my cat's tail. It's not the end of the discussion, of course. So, go forth and be an information warrior in your own life. I hope that you've at least heard of some resources that you hadn't encountered before, and will be able to use those in your own research going forward. This has been a wonderful experience. I've learned a lot, and I went through 2.5 years of grad school, but there's always more to learn, always more to learn. Well, thank you to our panelists this evening.
I just want to say thanks for having me, and I'm sorry for the whole car thing. I really am.
It worked out just fine.
I think it was kind of cool, so good job.
I do too. I kind of dug it.
Well, well, awesome. I'm glad. I'm sorry that I went away for a little bit. I was just like, but trying to balance being a mom and life. So sorry about that, but I was really, really glad to be here, and I was glad to contribute to the conversation.
I want to say thanks so much.
Thank you.
For including me. I appreciate the invitation very much, and I enjoyed my time with you tonight.
As did I. I was honored to be part of this. So thank you for asking me, and thank you for providing this too. And thank you for showing us your animals. I love seeing animals in Zoom calls.
Oh, all right. Well, you all have a wonderful evening. Again, thank you for joining us.
Good job.